Is this sound any better than the last one or the same?
That sounds good. Better.
Okay.
Okay. Rick, we'll defer to you when to start. I know it's 5 o'clock and I'm sure people are getting set up still.
Yeah, let's looks like we were missing quite a few people, so let's give another minute or two. See if folks can join on. Streamed on WHCI TV and YouTube TV, so members of the public can view our meeting this evening. We do have as folks had a chance to review the agenda, we have quite a few things to discuss this evening, so I will turn things over to you, Shauna. Shauna Kissman at Tool, or do you want, is it Parker or?
Yeah, I'll share my screen. I can't, I'm not as host yet, so I guess I'll be elevated so I can share my screen. There we go. Thank you. And just confirm that you can see it okay.
We can.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you very much. Just want to echo Rick's welcome and thanks for, the quick turnaround as we get underway with the action plan development. Before we get going, I just wanted to make a quick introduction. We have two new faces on our staff. Susan, who will be a regular fixture in the task force meetings in the meetings ahead, as well as Laura, and they'll be assisting from our team at FHI Studio as we go through this process. So this is their first meeting and just wanted to introduce them to the task force. Today, thank you for joining us. I'm sure you all took a look through the action plans that we sent out earlier. Shauna is just going to give some updates as it relates to the task force and the project as a whole before we get started. Adam is really going to lead a discussion with the task force as a group about what we've kind of learned and observed in the 4 action plans that we had as homework. And then we just want to do a final wrap up with some of the policies that we've identified thus far that we want to take a look at in the weeks ahead. Shauna is going to take a look and let's get on the same page with the mission statement and hopefully get that approved. And just a reminder, this is a public meeting. We have opportunity for public comment reserved for the end of this presentation prior to discussing next steps and our meeting at the end of the month. So that is our agenda for today, and I will kick it over to Shauna.
Okay, thanks, Parker. Can you guys hear me okay? Okay, great.
Yep.
Okay, so as Parker mentioned, we just want to kick off each of our task force meetings with just the general, sort of housekeeping. The task force charter that we discussed at our last meeting is shared here in this link on the town webpage. Some of the highlights that are in that charter are that we're all going to use this opportunity to listen to each other and speak openly and honestly, to share the floor so that all task members have a chance to share their opinions. We want to keep an open perspective and to consider perspectives that might be different than yours, but are still as valuable to this process. We want you all to take responsibility for the success of this meeting. And we also want to start and end on time. So with that said, we're carving out sometime at the end of our meeting for public comment. We had stated that we'll have 3 minutes per person for those in the public to share what their thoughts are at the end. And if time does run out, we welcome comments to be submitted to the project email, which is vision0@westhartfordct.gov, and we'll record those for the comment log. Next slide, please. So we want to thank all of you. We know that there's been a lot of communications and homework assignments and actions happening in the last couple of weeks. So thank you for honoring this process. I want to share a quick update on some work that Rick and I have been doing as mentioned earlier, we felt there are a couple voices of people in the community who are not represented on this task force currently, but we feel that they should be. So I've been doing some work reaching out to different entities to gather input on an Elmwood or New Park Avenue based resident or business owner. We also would like someone on this task force who is transit or bicycle dependent. That could be one person or it could be a couple people. I've reached out to our public libraries, Helen Rubino Turco, the Elmwood Business Association, and then I believe our colleague Elizabeth has also reached out to some of her peers. So I will say we are putting the word out. Oh, I also posted to the West Harvard Friends and Neighbors Facebook page. I haven't heard anything yet, but I'm hopeful that we will find the right person or people. And then Rick has worked with Rosina Haskins in the with the school district, and we are trying to identify a student or a representative of our schools to make sure we have student voices accounted for in this process. So I will say, if any of you have ideas or people in your connections or your networks who might fit the bill, please reach out and I'm happy to provide a script or just a little bit of detail, and you can just drop it into an email or share with your networks because we need some more people. Yes, Ace, you have a question?
I do have someone from the Elmwood area that I'm actually in communication with, and I dropped the ball. I didn't think she could make it to this meeting, but she can make it to the 26th meeting, and she's Maxine Nugent. She's a lifelong West Hartford resident, woman of color,
Awesome.
and a business owner, a small business owner. I don't know if she has an actual storefront like brick and mortar, but I know that she does business within our town also.
Amazing. Okay, why don't you and I follow up after and we can sort that out and get her up to speed.
Sounds good.
And I'm sorry, I do not see everyone in this meeting at the top ribbon, so I'm sorry if there's any other questions. I don't see them. Next slide, please. Okay, there's also been some discussion on the brand. I know Ace has developed a graphic as shown at the top of this document to the right, and she has done an awesome job of pulling together the town color palette and the town logo. I will say, I think there's a broader opportunity to do something like a community or a school competition to capture a brand. I know that we're trying to move quickly so that we have some materials to share at early June community engagement events. So I think this is awesome for now. And I think we can talk more broadly about branding as we roll through the process. The other thing to point out is that there's been some work, and I'm sorry, I'm not sure exactly who developed the pledge, but the pledge was shared with me. I understand it was taken from Hoboken's Vision Zero. In reviewing it, I just want to state that West Hartford is absolutely open to do a Vision Zero pledge. I just would want to make sure it is based on West Hartford's unique issues and challenges as it relates to roadway safety. So I think we might want to revisit the pledge and just make sure that it is something that comes from our process and is not just borrowed from Hoboken. So open for comment, but those are just a couple of task force updates that have gone around via email, but I wanted to make sure we are all just aware of what has been going on. Any questions, comments? Okay, I'm gonna pass it back to Parker. Oh, no, I'm not. I'm gonna talk about upcoming events. So there are so many things happening in June, and I want to make sure that we can best support anyone who's on this task force who is planning to be in the community and might be considering talking to the public about Vision Zero. And I really want to see everyone in this meeting, and I don't know how to see them at once. Are there any thoughts or definite commitments from folks about being at any of these events or others, and talking with people about Vision Zero? I think just unmute and shout so I can know who's speaking.
We got Mary with her hand up.
Mary?
Yes, I'm going to be at the Bike West Hartford table, but we are going to be talking about Vision Zero.
You are? Okay.
I'll
one
only
of
be
the
there for part of the time, but in my time there, I am also happy to talk about Vision Zero.
So that's June 10th and 11th, correct? Next weekend. Right?
Sorry, did I say something? I can't remember how I named it. I meant Celebrate West Hartford, whatever I said.
Yeah, no, I gotcha. Okay, so one of the things that I'm working on with my colleague is some talking points. And just so anyone who's on this task force and maybe wants to have something to reference can use the talking points, just to make sure we're all saying the same thing and representing Vision Zero kind of cohesively as a group. And then we were also thinking we might just create a kind of half-page graphic or flyer that the town or others on the task force might print and share out and point people to the website. So is that adequate for the support for pop-up events? Is there anything else going on that I should just know about? We want to recognize that we're not scoped to do pop-up events, but we want to support this task force in communications or material or otherwise. Okay. I think that is it for me at this time. Parker?
Great, thank you. I'm actually going to pass it to Adam. I don't know if you want to share your screen or just have me still share. I think you're muted.
I was indeed muted. Let me try sharing my screen so that everybody else doesn't have to hear me call for slide changes. All right. How is this? Can you all see me or see the screen?
Yep.
Great.
Thank you.
So thank you all for doing your homework and reviewing these plans. I am going to walk you through a sort of short top level review of those plans for everybody who didn't have an opportunity to get to them. And then we're going to have a discussion. We're going to shoot for about 25 to 30 minutes, and then I will follow up with next steps. So, you may have been wondering a little bit about why you were reviewing the plan or what you were looking for when you were reviewing the plan. And a big part of it right now, we're going to get to it in more detail, but for right now, it's going to be to help us establish this action plan framework. And that's really the sort of organization and the way that we're going to go about putting together the different strategies and actions and goals in order to move Vision Zero forward. So across all of the plans that you reviewed, they all had a very similar structure. They all started with an introduction and an explanation of what Vision Zero is. Many of you probably saw a graphic that shows the difference between sort of traditional thinking and Vision Zero thinking. The other thing that I don't think was in all of them, but is common to a lot of Vision Zero plans, is a personal story about how like a traffic fatality affected the community. It's a way of really grounding the conversation in why Vision Zero is so important. They all include a review of previous plans and policies that really sort of set the foundation for the Vision Zero work. They all included a technical analysis or sort of sort of establishing of the high injury network. They summarized the community engagement, and then they all had a plan that included goals, strategies, and actions, and we'll talk about that a little bit, and next steps. some of the things that they all had in common when it came to analysis, and what I think is important is risky behavior, high injury network in the crash modes, crash demographics, types of streets, types of intersections. They were all looking at very similar things. And I think this is really important because we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here with this Vision Zero action plan. We're really trying to follow a tried and true methodology that's going to help move West Hartford forward quickly. They also had a lot of common community engagement efforts. And as Shauna noted, we're not going to be doing all of this work, as in we, the consultant team, but we think that this is a really good list of ideas of ways to engage people in the community on this conversation and advancing Vision Zero. And I apologize if my dog is here. He's defending the fort against all intruders, foreign and domestic. But the community engagement work here is really focused on lots of different ways of engaging people, and I think that's the most important takeaway from all of this is you can't just do it in one way and expect to get a diverse and representative input into not just the plan itself, but also the continuing work after the actual implementation of the action plan. And then I'm going to hand it over to Laura to talk a little bit about the organization elements and some of these things that some plans called them themes, some plan called them goals. Focus areas was another way of talking about it, but just sort of how they're organized.
Yeah, hi everyone. So like Adam mentioned, we found in reviewing the 4 plans that as an organizational element, the framework to each plan followed these 5 topics that we identified in the left in that brighter yellow. And these were the overarching umbrellas that the plans used to then go into defining the goals and actions within each overarching topic. And while each of these 4 plans has a different naming convention and defined them specifically through their own process for what works in their own location, we found that equity, safety, culture, data, and practices were the similar themes that spoke through in each of them.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. I really appreciate that. And so the key thing here being, and I think what sort of you can see across here is they all had slightly different ways of stating things. So Lancaster wanted to be really short and brief. So they just used one word, right? Equity, safety, culture. Tacoma was, used safe people, safe roads, safe data and reporting, right? So they wanted to clearly emphasize safety. Des Moines was more of an action oriented, as was Jersey City, right? A verb followed by something else, right? So build safe streets for everyone, promote safe streets. The key here is that all of these are good. There's no wrong way of organizing and presenting this information. It's going to be what works best for West Hartford and what's going to help you all, especially when it comes to the communication of the recommendations of this action plan. So one of the frameworks that we really liked here is just a very simple organization where you had an action item, so in this case, safe speed, and you had the goal called out here. So this was reduce driving speeds to lower the frequency and harm of crashes. That was followed by a series of strategies, which were then supported by actions. And the idea here is the goal is what you're trying to achieve. Where are you trying to go? We all know that the overarching goal is Vision Zero, right? It's zero fatalities and serious injuries. But what are the sort of goals within that you're looking for? The strategies are all about how you go about achieving your goal, your approach. The way that I think that it is to think about this is strategies are really not quite down to the nitty gritty of the how. There's still what you're trying to do. And then the action is really the specific policy, program, project, partnership, or advocacy effort that you're going to undertake that's going to move you closer to the goal. So with that, I will just say, don't worry too much about this organizational piece. We'll get into it and we'll have a deeper conversation about how to write goals and strategies and actions going forward. So I just wanted to make it clear though that all of the plans included this framework in just various formations. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing my screen in a minute here. And I'd like to have a conversation with all of you. What we're going to do is we're going to have about 30 minutes. I know that with a large group like this, sometimes it can feel like you don't have enough time to share your points. So please feel free to follow up on these questions with emails. And just as I said, a reminder, we're not yet talking about goals, strategies, and actions. We're really going to be talking about organization and plan organization framework. And what we're going to talk about is, and I'm going to take this down in a minute and I'll ask these questions, but what about the organization of the documents that you read do you think would work well for West Hartford? What do you think about the organization of the action plans? Do you think would work well for West Hartford? And what I mean by action plans is I mean that sort of goal, strategy, action framework. And then, were there any sections or call outs or focus areas that you really wanted to see in West Hartford? So I'm going to take this down and we'll go through those questions one-on-one. And I will just, but I just wanted to preview that for them. And so you all know, Laura and I are going to be taking very vigorous notes along the way, but luckily this is also being recorded. And the way that I would like to do this is, let's try just working on, I can see, I think, everybody on my screen. So we can start by just, if you want to answer the question, you can unmute yourself. And if we start to get people stacked up, I believe in the lower bottom of your screen, you get a little thing. I just raised it. You can raise your hand and we can start to call on people. But for now, what I wanted to hear from everybody is just, from an organization perspective, what did you like about the document that you reviewed? And what do you think is sort of appropriate or applicable for the work that we're doing here in West Hartford? Renee, did you
This
take
is
your,
this
yeah.
is Shauna.
Oh,
Dana.
Sha-
Okay, hello everybody. I'm happy to see you all here today. Again, I wanted to give you a friendly reminder that this type of information does need to be accessible in American Sign Language. So I just encourage us all, when we do start to develop more of a concrete document, I strongly encourage that we think about making it American Sign Language accessible first, and then we can be ready to share that with the text. Not sharing the text first and then later on trying to make it into American Sign Language. So that's what will work best for our deaf and hard of hearing sign language users in West Hartford. And it will also set up a model for others, either others in the community or other communities to be able to follow.
thank you very much. Are there other people who had comments on, Renee, I saw you took yourself off mute, and Adrian, I see that your hand is up as well. Renee, do you want to start and then we'll go to Adrian?
Yes, sure. So I really liked what you just showed about, how it's presented with the action item, the goal, the strategy, and the key action table. I really like how that looks. Similar in Lancaster, they had an action plan presentation, very similar, that clearly presented a timeline and major needs. So I think that could work for us. And then they had some other graphical representation, like a knowledge pie chart when asked, how much do you know about Vision Zero? So that was interesting to kind of see that. Now, pass it on.
Yeah,
Yes,
Renee, that's really helpful. So what I'm hearing is, a clear presentation of sort of timeline and major needs is really important, and that you sort of like some of the visual elements, so it's not all words out there. And that talks a little bit to Shauna's discussion about accessibility and making sure that it's really clear and easy to understand. Great. Adrian, I'm going to hand it off to you, and I'm just going to say, I should have started with you. You spell your name the same way that my sister spells her name, so I've got a certain affinity for the Adrian that you are. So
I appreciate that, Adam. I really
Yeah.
do. Thank you. So I was just basically going to say the same thing off of Des Moines that I liked with the visuals, but I also like that it kind of set up a timeline. I think within this group, we're all looking for that timeline, and I think our residents are looking for some sort of timeline once that and have it sitting on our website. I think that is really good, and I like that it has what's happening and then kind of next steps, so people know what's coming. And since we are trying to get materials together for these 3 events, letting people know that we're out and about, so what that looks like, I think is important. But I think mostly what Renee said, I like the graphics. I like that you're showing it in different ways, so people can learn in whatever way they prefer to learn. And I think we probably need to get, I know we can't get anything data-wise put up there per se, but some of those graphics up there with some questions, or like the pledge piece with the Hoboken piece. I agree with you completely, Shauna, that we need to have something that's based in West Hartford and what we're unique to us. So I would love to go through that, because if we're going to have this piece and then we're going to be only now 4 months away, and we want to make sure that people were taking advantage of these people being outside right now to get that done. So I like maybe getting some of our website pieces up that we can at this point.
Yep. Yeah, that's really helpful. So what I'm hearing, and Edward, I see you next. What I'm hearing here a little bit is just the importance of timeline, not just for your all work, but for a communication strategy to the community, and so that people understand when things are going to happen and how long it's going to take. And there's a sort of that connects with the sense of sort of urgency that's around some of these issues. Yeah, Edward.
Oh, hi. I just wanted to clarify, I'm not sure I understood. Is this conversation now our reactions to the action plans that we reviewed, or is that coming just in a little bit?
Yes, it's into the action plans that you reviewed. And so we're still talking about, we're not getting into the details of like the specific strategies or goals. We're still talking about organization, because that's the next step for us, is to sort of define the organization of the West Hartford plan. And then we'll get into the discussion of strategies and actions.
Okay, I'll hold off on this for now. Thanks.
Okay. Jay. Oh, you're still on mute. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Adam. Specifically on the structure, the group that had a discussion today on Jersey City's action plan was almost unanimous in appreciating the way that it was, laid out graphically and organized around themes. And then in the latter parts of the plan, the themes were correlated to action plans and specific actors or responsible parties. But I think the way that the Jersey City action plan, which was really well reviewed by our group, by the way, sort of like led from themes into concrete actions with specific tasks delineated, was a real strength. And then maybe also on structure, we had a significant discussion about the biographies of people killed and injured that were presented in the Jersey City document as well. And I'll leave some of the detailed discussion till later, but we had a discussion about the audience for the plan and whether it's going to be professional people or whether it's going to be people in the community and who the plan should be speaking to. And I think a lot of us felt like the audience was clearly people in the community rather than the professionals who were in, maybe engaged on the team from the town or from the task force.
Yeah, Jay, that's a really great set of comments there. So I heard two things. Sort of one was the thematic connectivity in the action plan and the fact that there was sort of a foundation established early and that those themes carried forward, and then there were specific strategies and actions tied to those themes. And then the question about biographies, and you sort of bring up a really important question that I think, is worth talking about a little bit here, which is who is the audience for the plan? And what I'm hearing from you is you felt like for the Jersey City plan, the audience was more public facing. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely, Adam. I think we had considered the plan to be public facing that was presented from Jersey City, and I think we also were largely in support of making that true for West Hartford as well, and sort of having the audience that we hope to engage and that we hope to invigorate with this action plan to be the public more than the pros.
Yeah. Did anybody else on the committee, did anybody else notice who the audience was as part of their review of the plan and see anything that they thought was appropriate or maybe inappropriate for West Hartford? Yeah, Edward.
So I made the point during, I think it was the Jersey City committee meeting that I attended today, that honestly, I think the only people who will be reviewing these 40-page action plans are folks on this task force, professionals. I don't think that just your everyday citizen has the time, to wade through these documents. I don't think that's how that's the best vehicle for us to be communicating the project, the goals of the project, the actions of the project at all, because I think we'll reach very few people that way. It's has to be, I believe, through a very accessible project website, maybe with links to things like biographies of folks, who were involved in accidents, a very easily interpreted data dashboard, new project descriptions. Honestly, I just don't think most people are going to have the time to read through 40 pages of action plans. It's just not, that's not where we should be communicating with folks. It's important for the design, the structure of the project for sure, but that's not, I don't think that's going to reach a target audience.
Yeah, I'm curious from other people who were reviewing some of the other plans, whether they thought their plan was, Greg's got a green card up, whether the review of their plans, whether they saw the plans that they were reading as more sort of public facing versus technical, and feelings on what would be more appropriate for West Hartford.
I agree with what Ed was saying, that I looked at the Des Moines one today, and it's just more information than people are going to look at. If not, I mean, it just has to be something that quick. And yeah, I don't think it'll get much further past all of us.
Yeah. Thank you. Mary.
Okay.
Whoever that was who just wanted to chime in, go ahead.
This is Karen, and unfortunately I'm in Tennessee and babysitting, so I won't be around very long. But I do think that these documents are very large and it would be a turnoff for people. But I think some of the visuals that are in some of the documents are really helpful. I know that looking at low-cost design treatments, I found them very helpful in kind of visualizing what are possibilities. So I think targeting some of the information to community groups would be helpful, and give people a framework and to start thinking about it. Getting back to the comment about accessibility for people, my concern has always been disseminating information to maybe non-English speaking populations, being careful about using too much technology for people who might have difficulty accessing, like some elderly residents or people who don't have the technology. So I would be very concerned about making sure the information gets out in a variety of ways. But I do think like something like the street audits, a lot of information can be disseminated through smaller community groups, and I think we'd have success with that. So at some point, I'm going to disappear when my granddaughter walks in, but I just wanted to get that out.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you for sharing. Mary.
So I looked at the Tacoma plan and the Jersey City plan, and the Jersey City plan, it's very clear to me that the front half is much more geared towards everyone, and the back half is a little bit more technical. But I do want to push back on the idea that no one really reads these. It is true that I don't expect 65,000 people in West Hartford to be reading these. But people do read these, especially when things go wrong. And people go back and look at them and see, did the town live up to what the town said it was going to do? We have talked before about how we should be a model for the state. And that means that other people across the state are going to be reading what we do and deciding whether it's good or bad. So, I think that the front half, particularly of the Jersey City plan, was fantastic, with a lot of visuals, a lot of graphics, a lot of data, really clear language. Why does Jersey City need Vision Zero instead of just something vague like understanding Vision Zero? It's very oriented towards the community, and then it gets more technical in the back, and that's a pattern that I would like to follow.
Yeah, how do other people feel about that? Because Jay's got we're starting to reach compromise. I'm seeing a green card from Jay here. I do think it's important to, and I will editorialize this, recognize that we can break these plans up, and the plans can sort of be in some ways the warehouse for a lot of different material that you then break up and distribute out. But as a general organization, I personally like the idea of sort of a public-facing front half and a more technical back end, almost like an executive summary up front that then leads into the rest. Can I get some green, yellow, red cards on that idea there, and see if we can just generally agree to that? Oh, seeing lots of green cards. All right. Seeing some green cards. That seems to be a good decision that we've made here, which I always like. So I do want to, Parker, how much more time do we have on the discussion?
Let's say 6 o'clock.
Oh, perfect. Okay. So when it came to the way that the plan started to talk about their specific strategies or themes or goals or different ways of presenting those kind of core ideas, I'm curious what people thought about the plans that they recommended. Now, we're not getting into the goals and strategies and actions themselves, but the sort of the way that they were presented. Some plans use like table, were really table heavy. Some were much more sort of design oriented. I'm curious about the presentation of that information, what people thought about that. Yeah, Dwayne. Yep.
Are you asking about the actions in the plan, goals and actions?
Yeah, so when you got to kind of the back, right? Most plans had this sort of technical analysis. They presented the high injury network, and then they started to present the recommendations. And what I'm kind of curious from you all is, you know, when reviewing the recommendations and the plans that you reviewed, was there anything that you really liked about how it was presented, or anything that you felt like was like really difficult or maybe wasn't appropriate for West Hartford?
So a few comments from the meetings that I attended. The table format seemed favorable, provided you're not flipping back and forth, you know, that it's concise enough where you can get all the information you need on that one page. And then also making sure that it included a timeline so that people have an understanding of what to expect to complete those actions and goals. And then also one of the action plans had responsible parties listed. Maybe not the person's name, but maybe the title or department or division, just so that people understood who was handling that particular goal or action.
Yeah, those are all, I think, really great pieces. So I heard about sort of the idea of presenting things in table format, assuming that there's not a whole lot of flipping back and forth and they're clearly organized. Timeline, that's another time that we've heard this come up again, the sort of importance of time and time-bounded recommendations. And then you called out this sort of responsible party, who's important there. Did anybody else sort of gravitate to some of those ideas or identify anything else in those elements? Everybody just fall asleep reading all of those plans and just didn't make it to the end of the planning element?
So can I share, Adam?
Yes, please.
I really like Lancaster's because it was short and sweet, and I think this is the one Dwayne is referencing, but the action table was very concise, and they had a couple of columns stating, you know, what are key things that are needed here? It's funding, it's personnel or resources, and it's legislation. And I thought having those very clearly articulated were easy to kind of look at each action and get a snapshot of kind of the order of magnitude with cost, and if there were some other major considerations to implementing each of those tasks.
Yeah, I think those are all really great points. I mean, so for people who did not get to see that one, I will pull up that one. That one's a little bit more of all of them. That one's a little bit more design oriented, I would say. And as you get to the back of it, so this is the Lancaster one, as you get to the back of it and you get to those recommendations, this is sort of what you're talking about here, Shauna, is that correct? This sort of, and this speaks a little bit to the idea of tables and being time bound. And this was something that was sort of unique to Lancaster, this major needs, whether it's staffing, legislation, or funding for each of these. Did anybody else review Lancaster and like this sort of organization or find it interesting? Yeah, Renee. And then Mary, I see you too.
Yeah, I was just one of the ones that did review Lancaster, and I brought that up at the very beginning about this particular table. So.
Yeah. Mary, did you want to share something?
Yeah, I think the one that Dwayne was referring to was Jersey City, because we had two back-to-back meetings today. So we reviewed Tacoma and Jersey City for about a long time today. But that one has the action, it has the departments, it has a performance measure, which we all thought was really important. Especially in this group, we have talked in the past about not wanting another plan that just sits on the shelf. And that's something that some people can actually look to see, was this met? And that was, we all really liked that.
Yeah, so this was, you know, to show everybody, Jersey City's got this sort of narrative up front, and then the key strategies for what they want to do here, right? Which sort of talks about the major thrust of it, and then these actions, which include partners, again, timeline, and you called out here, Mary, performance measures, which is something that isn't necessarily in some of the other plans, but I think is an interesting piece to consider.
Can I add on to that statement,
Yeah.
Adam? So one thing
Yeah.
I thought would be helpful with the Jersey City was to see an overall timeline of how those kind of stacked up with each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is there anything else that anybody on the committee would think is going to really help ensure that this plan doesn't sit on the shelf? And I mean more from what we include in recommendations, not, you know, let's not get into who needs to do what, but just sort of in the overall organization or what needs to be included in the plan.
I'll just add too, I think I've heard from a lot of members of the committee that, you know, certainly thinking about accessibility, whether it's print, ASL, you know, reaching key populations, we certainly can take that back and think about the means of communicating this information, whether it might be built online first, paper first. We can have that discussion and you know, we're at the beginning of this and suit the needs of the town.
Yeah. Dwayne, did you have something? And then Mary?
Yeah, I was just going to comment that in the end, when the action plan is done and we have the goals and actions laid out with the timelines, there is going to be some obstacles in the way, whether it's staffing or funding. So I actually liked that component in there just to manage expectations, because we may be able to achieve some of the goals that are identified, but we may have to sort of navigate through some of those hurdles. So the precision of the timeline may be affected by those hurdles.
Yeah.
So that just needs to be taken into consideration. And maybe if you include those hurdles in the table, it might help people understand.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. So bringing in, you know, there's the sort of known knowns and the unknown knowns and all of that statement, but the idea that we should identify what obstacles may stand in the way of implementing something to move forward. Mary, did you have something else to add?
Yeah, and I should say, I'm just not sure procedurally, like we had all prepared the sort of 5 things we like and 5 things we don't like. And so I don't want to jump ahead if we were going to do that.
No.
But
Go ahead.
No, I'm sorry. I asked you a question that I went ahead and interrupted.
No, please. I mean, I think that was sort of the goal of these questions, was try to get at those 5 things you liked and 5 things that you didn't like. Is there anything that you haven't been able to talk about with respect to the discussion?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things, but I will say to sort of try and scooch one into your question, which was sort of making sure it doesn't sit on the shelf. One thing that we really liked from one of the plans, and I'm not sure if it was Tacoma or Jersey City, I think it was Jersey City, there was a lot of community outreach, particularly at places where people in the community were already gathering. And we also talked in the Tacoma plan about safe routes to school. And we had in the past talked about, you know, children and sort of more connection with schools. And just in general, I think that the more community outreach we do, the more partnerships, whether formal or informal, that we make in the community, the more people will be asking, wait, what's going on with this thing that I talked with you about last year? And that will help the momentum keep going. on this. You know, we have talked in the past as well about how really the sort of when people stop paying attention, things start to backslide. And the more sort of outreach we do now, it might help with that going forward.
Yeah, that's really helpful. Is there anything else? Because I do want to wrap up and kind of get to next steps. That anything else people wanted to share about things that they liked or thought were relevant? Yeah, Edward.
If I may, to the point of ensuring that this plan does not just sit on the shelf. The town a few years ago passed a complete streets policy, and one of the requirements in that policy is to issue an annual report to the town council, which the engineering division prepares each year. And that's a report of accountability. It reports on successes and challenges in meeting the complete streets policy. I read 2 of the action plans of Tacoma and Jersey City, and my eyes were a little bit crossed, but I don't recall seeing in either of the 2, maybe it's in there, but requirement for an annual report to be made public on just how is the town done. Give a report card for that year. How have we done on Vision Zero? Let's be fully accountable. Let's be fully transparent on how we've done, what challenges we've encountered, and how we're going to do better next year.
Great. Thank you, Edward. That's very, very helpful. So with that, I'm going to go to sort of talk a little bit more about our next steps. And to the point earlier, if anybody has anything that they didn't feel like they were able to share during that discussion, please, email it forward and we will certainly be taking a look. So one thing that we would like all of you to do in the time between this meeting and the next meeting, and we will get a link to you out to this, is to review the Vision Zero's network guide for an effective Vision Zero action plan. So now that you've looked at sort of an example of a plan, we'd like you to review these recommendations. So the Vision Zero network is a group that does advocacy, support, and partnerships around Vision Zero. But one of the big things that they do is they share resources and they promote good standards. And we think this document is a really good review of sort of best practices when it comes to Vision Zero plan writing and action plan writing. So they're going to talk a lot about collecting and analyzing data, setting measurable goals, identifying sort of, and this is something that we came up with here, is sort of identifying lead agencies and sort of partner agencies. And then, Edward, to your comment right there about the importance of providing opportunities to sort of measure progress and course correct, to talk about and report where you are and what you're going to be doing on a regular basis. The other thing that the plan does, the report does, that I think is going to be helpful for you all, is it includes a lot of sort of what I would say are best practices strategies for going about achieving Vision Zero. Now, these are all very good ideas. They are starting points for conversation. I don't think we want to just copy these into the action plan and move forward. We're going to need to come up with our own and do some tailoring maybe of some of these as we see appropriate. But I think it's going to give you a really good idea of the types of strategies and actions to be thinking about going forward as we start to build this plan out. And thinking ahead, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be taking the conversation that we just had with you all and starting to develop and finalize the organization that's going to work well for West Hartford. And then we're going to start digging into the goals and the strategies and actions, the real meat and potatoes of the planning. I guess in today's world, meat and potatoes isn't Exactly, the right term. I don't know what we're potatoes and greens maybe is what we should be saying. But that the we're going to be getting into the core recommendations here, and so we're going to talk a little bit at our next meeting about how we're going to approach that based on the framework and what we're going to be doing. So if you all have been chomping at the bit to start thinking about strategies and actions, know that that's coming along. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over, I believe, to Parker and Chana to talk a little bit about the plan and policy review. And I can keep the slides up, or I can.
Yeah, keep the slides up, please.
Okay.
And just stay tuned. We'll have a little bit more info on those next steps before we depart. I just wanted to give a brief overview of where we stand with the plan and policy review. We've done initial identification of some of the plans and policies as it relates to the town. If you can go to the next slide. And really, an initial starting point for us is to take a look at, you already mentioned, Ed, the Complete Streets Annual Report. A lot of great information in there, a lot of relevant plans and policies that are referenced in that document. So took a look at that, as well as the bicycle friendly community application that the town prepared for 2023, and a lot of discussion about how these different policies and plans interact with one another. So we really took an initial look from that, with as well as online resources at the town. Next slide. So of course, we wanted to take a quick look through the town code to see relevant sections, whether it be bicycle restrictions, chapter 53, chapters on streets and sidewalks, or vehicle and traffic regulations. The zoning code is also part of the town code. There are several different topical areas that I think are certainly related to our efforts here with Vision Zero, whether it be kind of what's required in terms of street design with transit-oriented development, or some of these traditional neighborhoods, bike parking's in there, drive-through where drive-throughs are permitted, or even corner visibility setback. So a lot of these little design details, even from the engineering side, we can kind of trace back into the zoning code and see what's there. Mary, you have a question?
I do. I was wondering if you were also going to be looking at minimum parking requirements as part of this.
I know parking is certainly in there as well. We can certainly have that conversation as we continue. In addition to the zoning code and the town code in general, certainly wanted to recognize a lot of the policies and plans that have already been adopted in the last 10 years or so, whether it be the Complete Streets policy dating back to 2015, the bike facilities plan. I think the latest one is 2016 or 18. Just noting that this is being updated with this contract following our Vision Zero work. New Park Avenue. I know we've already had, as a group, have had a lot of conversation about what's happening there. Of course, that was kicked off really with the study back in 2017. I know things have kind of evolved since then. Some DPW policies, even maintenance and protection of traffic. I know that's come up recently with some of the construction projects around town. Neighborhood street traffic calming from last year. To even some of the design details with infrastructure rules and specifications. And then lastly, some of the bigger projects we've had, North Main Street Road Diet. We've seen that implemented last year, and know that that's really ongoing with some of the bike lanes that are planned to be added, and the West Hartford Center master plan. So these are really as it relates to the town. If there's anything that we've missed, we can certainly have a discussion, or feel free to email us. We're going to have certainly a more detailed review through this month as we have continue our conversations with the town. And as it relates to the region and state, we know that this is not things that the town can necessarily control, but we can certainly put in our plan for advocacy to change these through our legislators, or through the representatives at CROG, whether it be with CROG, the Complete Streets policy, or roundabout study or many of their other work that CROG does as a region, and the state from the DOT Complete Streets Plan, Active Transportation Plan, and of course, general state laws. We know that even the Vision Zero law is something that passed the House but might not make it through the Senate. So just being aware of that and potentially using this plan as taking a position for advocacy. So that's all I have. Again, I just want to say that if there's anything that you want to see added or any other comments, please feel free to email us. Thank you.
Parker, it looked like Ed had a comment as well.
Sorry, I can't see everyone's hands.
Oh.
I simply, in the chat, I asked if you'd be reviewing the town's plan of conservation and development.
Sure, that's certainly something that should be added to the list. Thank you.
Parker, do you mind advancing to the next slide, please? Okay. I recognize.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Shauna, so I don't think we worked on it all weekend.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Okay. That
So
wasn't.
Adrian and I like sort of crossed paths.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you know what? You can, never mind. Go ahead.
If you have it available, I mean, I think we can.
Yeah, I mean,
screens or whatever, Shauna.
This is the task force's mission statement that you guys developed before we even came onto the scene. So Adrian had sent over where it was on, I think, Thursday or Friday. I marked it up, I shared it back, but I am not married to this. I was just helping to refine it so that we could get to a good place and that the task force could hopefully agree on what the mission statement was and that we could then adopt it into the charter. But Mary, I'm sorry, I didn't realize that there was other efforts going on. I thought this was the groups. So happy to look at whatever you have or to just be a resource as you guys try to finalize the mission statement.
Yeah, I think the confusion was she sent that back to me as the next iteration, and then we worked on it more. I don't think I realized that this one was going to be pulled in.
No worries at all. It can still be, we can still refine it. And I was just kind of going through the process of showing that you can advance the next slide, Parker, just that it's an iterative process to try to get there to really document what it is that we're doing, how we're doing it, and why we're doing it. So Mary, if there's something that I can do, maybe set up a quick like huddle and we can work together, or if you guys have it in a good spot, then we can push that forward. So I'm happy to be a resource, but I don't need to insert myself into the process.
We can just do this. That's fine.
Okay. So this is a lot of content, and I want to just be clear that I respect the time and energy that people have put into developing this. And in essence, it states that the town is committed to eliminating roadway deaths and serious injuries within 10 years, and that the way that the task force is going to do this is by conducting meaningful public engagement and capturing the needs of marginalized members of our community. I know this language and identifying who those communities are is important to this group, and making sure that we identify people who have traditionally been left out of the conversation, who are more impacted by roadway violence. So that is in essence the first paragraph. And then the second paragraph goes into how we will achieve this goal, and that is by analyzing the crash data, referencing the town's programs, plans, and policies, as Parker just preceded this, and then integrating community input into whatever actions shake out of this process. The task force will identify evidence-based interventions to effectively and equitably improve the safety of our transportation systems, and will develop measurable goals and strategies to guide the town towards zero roadway deaths. I recognize that there's a lot of words on this slide, and I don't expect you all to comprehend it right now. So I'm happy to share out afterwards. My next slide was just a quick discussion about anything that's missing or any statements to add. So if I open the floor to you all for your gut thoughts or critique.
Ted's got his hand up.
I think the last sentence referenced only deaths. It should be deaths and serious injuries throughout.
Okay, we can update that.
Thank you.
Any other thoughts on the content, the length, anything that we've omitted? Okay, I don't see any comments, but if anyone is raising their hand, please just unmute and feel free to pipe in. With that said, do we want to take out the green, red, and yellow cards and make a vote and finalize this, given Ed's comments? And then if there's anything else that comes in, I would say within the next minute or so, we can edit. Mary.
So I think one thing that had been there earlier that I know was a little bit of a point of discussion was whether we could include enjoyable mobility options for all.
Okay.
So I'm just going to maybe copy and paste this paragraph, which I think eventually got to where I think my only concern is that whenever there is a problem area, there are always multiple solutions. And I want to make sure that we are picking the one that is not just safe, but also enjoyable for people. One thing that we noticed in either Tacoma or Jersey City, I'm not sure which one it was the recognition that people are more likely to experience serious injuries or die on roadways as vehicle miles traveled increase. And so one of those plans included the goal of reducing vehicle miles traveled as part of their Vision Zero strategy. And I think because a part of that, enjoyable is important to me. And so that is part of it. And I think that that's really some of the part of it that I would like to see changed.
I think that was something I highlighted as well in a couple of the plans, was just not just that we want to make them safe, but also like people can have fun on our transportation systems. And I appreciate that perspective. So that sounds like a good recommendation. It looks like there's also a suggestion from William that once we start listing the marginalized, we run the risk of missing someone, and perhaps they're leaving the list of the marginalized out and put a period after community. So I also believe that there was back and forth with the mission statement group on this point, in that when you just say for all, then people get left out. So I'm happy to open the floor to anyone who was on the mission statement subcommittee.
Yes. So I think Sandy isn't here and Adrian isn't here either. I think Shayna is. So Shayna could chime in as well. But a couple things. Number one is that in our last meeting, there was pushback against the word marginalized. I think there was someone on the task force who didn't think that communities would appreciate being referred to themselves as marginalized. And so I did rephrase that a little bit to especially members of those communities who experience disproportionate injury and death on roadways as one approach to dealing with that. We early on, I think in our first or second meeting, we did discuss whether we should just say for all or to highlight specific groups that we need to keep an eye on. And I think we decided that we do need to sort of mention people specifically or groups specifically, simply because historically and currently, we do know that certain groups of people aren't considered quite as much in the planning process. And also because for Vision Zero in particular, there are groups that we don't tend to think about often. So for example, children or people who are elderly, we don't tend to think about them all the time when we're thinking about people who aren't listened to, but they really are important for Vision Zero. So that's why we wanted to list them all out.
Okay, thanks for your justification. I
And
think
just,
that we
I'll add just a consideration from the technical point of view. I guess if we have a list, I think that we can probably break out some data based on the list that you provide us. If we have it.
And this is Shayna. Yeah, especially about what you were just saying about data, that would be very beneficial. However, that would also bring up another challenge, because if we want to recognize people with different disabilities, I mean, if you just think about that group, there's such a variety of subgroups in the disability categories. So for data, it would have to be kind of all separated out. People with disabilities, and then if you had the deaf, if you saw the data for deaf individuals, for people with autism, and having individual groups within that group, not just clumping everyone together when it does come to data.
So truly just aggregating that data is key.
Okay. I can see from this conversation that there are, you know, a whole spectrum of thoughts and kind of considerations in how we are identifying communities who are disproportionately affected, and then how granular do we want to get. So I actually think that this might warrant maybe more of a discussion than we are prepared to have at this time. But I think what I would like to do next is just follow up with the people who worked on the mission statement and just sort of discuss the feedback that we heard today, and hopefully setting it up soon. I know this has been in development for a while. So I think with that, and thank you everyone for your feedback. I appreciate it. I will hand it back to Parker.
Thank you, Shauna. So before we wrap up, I just want to give kind of a look ahead to what our next steps are. And thank you for the bi-weekly meetings here through June. Our next meeting is in person on June 26th. And that will be the third meeting with the consultant team. As Adam mentioned, we have the guidelines for effective Vision Zero action plan. We're asking that you take a read through that as part of your homework, I guess. Next meeting, we want to take a look at the overarching goals and framework. And we will take everything we've heard today from the task force and prepare a draft for comment from the task force. From there, we should have some topic areas for Vision Zero. I know we already have some committees established. We have 4 committees. And our thought at this point in time is to assign each committee a topic area. And we saw today how they are structured really into the granular details of actions and strategies. And then the committees can really take a look in depth within each topic area. So just in terms of the calendar where we're at, that will be end of June. And if you jump to the right side, our August 7th, we'll start the series of 3 meetings where we'll do a little round robin with each of these topic areas and start talking as a whole task force, what the committees found, what the consultant team found, and really come to consensus as a task force as it relates to the granular details of each of these topic areas. We do have a meeting in between that, so July 24th. We'll use that as an opportunity for us to present some of the data that Shauna and her team at Tool will be developing for that meeting. That will include probably some of the initial takes that the high injury network could look like based on what they are seeing. We owe a survey and a interactive map to the task force. We know that after this series of meetings in September, we have our first public meeting. So that's something that we'll be able to start introducing to the public in that early fall timeframe. And again, as I said, throughout that July period, having meetings internally, you should have meetings with the committees, and then us as a consulting team being part of some of those meetings on an as-needed basis. And just want to note the last row here, we've already talked about it early on in the presentation, inclusive community engagement. We're here to support the task force and whatever events that you want to attend in terms of materials, in terms of messaging, in any way that we can. So we can have a further conversation about that in June 26th. I think Shauna's got some action items for some events in June that we can take care of, and just we'll continue the conversation to next meeting. Next slide. We can have a brief conversation about this. And just want to highlight what we're going to be doing as a project team before the next meeting. Again, working to develop an initial framework based on the discussion that we heard today, that crash data analysis. We identified some of the plans and policies. We heard about some new ones that we should include and finalize some of our takeaways from that. And then begin developing this survey and interactive map development. We have on our side as well to work with the town in various stakeholders at the town level and various departments in terms of engagement with those departments, interviews, and we will be slotted in to make those happen on an as-needed basis. Any questions on kind of where we're going? So a reminder, this is a public meeting, so I'm just going to pause for like 30 seconds to see if there's any public comment, and also I will defer to you, Dwayne, if you're still on. I don't know what, I know there's YouTube and other things going on.
Yeah, Parker, I think I don't think folks would have an ability to make a comment in this setting because we are set up, we are being streamed live on YouTube TV, but the public won't have the ability to access this particular meeting and ask a question. So we can hold off on public comment for tonight and add that to the agenda for June 26th when we're meeting in person.
So I'll defer to any public comment or any comments from the task force and those in attendance.
Yeah, Ed, did you have something? I don't think Parker can see you. Yep.
So there was a monthly meeting of the Pedestrian and Bicycle Commission on September 11. I wonder if there's any flexibility in moving that task force date. We've avoided that in the past.
Shauna, I'll defer to you. You develop the
Yeah,
initial
we'll take a look at the schedule. As you know, there are, we're just working with the town's holiday schedule and then the overall schedule for this project to make sure we capture 12 task force meetings. So, as well as a couple of public meetings that we have to prepare for. So I'm not sure that we can reschedule that one since we hold these on Mondays. I'll take a look, but thank you for sharing. And I mean, I guess the expectation is that I'm thinking that there will be some conflicts among the task force members. We, will try to be respectful, but I know that there will just be some unavoidable conflicts, and that goes for the project team as well. Like sometimes you won't see all of us, and we'll still have a good showing of our group. So you have the familiar faces and the continuity. So
What
thank
time
you
is that
for
meeting
sharing.
at?
What's that?
What time is the meeting?
It's at 7 o'clock.
7 o'clock. Okay.
I think these are scheduled to end at 6:30.
Yeah, most of them have been 5 to 6:30.
Okay, so I guess we'll be stacking meetings that night, Ed. I hope that's okay.
Okay. You owe me a cup of coffee.
Okay, you got it. You don't have to twist my arm for coffee. Oh, the other thing I wanted to mention is that I sent out an email before this meeting. If you are on the task force and you are not a town staff person, can you fill in your either affiliation or organization that you're representing? We have a similar understanding of the town roles and departments that are on this task force, but we don't for the community members. So I shared out the link just before this meeting, and just fill in your name and your affiliation, and that would be really beneficial to us as we move forward.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you for attending, and we'll see everyone on the 26th.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you all very much.
Thank you.